I'm Dr. Brad Hafford, archaeologist and economic anthropologist. Welcome to Coin Corner, where I take a look at coins from the past to see what they can tell me about the authority that issued them and the people who used them. My examples are not always in the best condition, but even their wear patterns can tell us something, at least that they circulated heavily to fulfill their primary purpose as currency. As an anthropologist, I'm more interested in use, symbolism, and meaning than collector value. In each episode, I choose two connected examples so that we can learn even more through the comparison. In this case, I'm looking at two 3-cent coins from the United States. Both were struck in the 19th century, but of different metals. We start with the obverse of the first coin. The obverse carries the clearest symbol of the issuing authority. Often, it's the profile of a leader or other important person from the country, and so it's sometimes called heads. In this case, there's no head, but the name of the issuing country is stamped around the outer edge, United States of America. There's also a clear symbol of the country, a 6-pointed star with a shield in the center. This example is quite heavily worn, so I'll show a portion of a much better preserved coin to make it clearer. The symbol is not as well recognized today as it might have been then, but the U.S. flag contains stars for every state and stripes for the original 13 colonies. The shield bears stripes inside it, and so this symbol is something like a condensed flag. Furthermore, this Shield of the Union, as it's called, is part of the Great Seal of the United States even today, where it sits on the breast of the bald eagle, the national bird of the USA. Just beneath this symbol is the date, 1853. This was the third year of production of this particular coin, and more than 11 million were struck. The U.S. was on a bimetallic standard for defining monetary value at the time, meaning that both gold and silver were coined as legal tender. But in such a system, if one metal becomes more valuable as raw material compared to the other, then people hold on to the coins made of that metal. This was the case with silver coins in the 1840s and 50s, as silver had gone up in value compared to gold, partly due to the gold rush in California. Many people melted their silver coins down and sold the silver for gold. Then they bought more silver coins at face value and started the cycle all again. This took almost all silver coins out of circulation by the early 1850s. The 3-cent silver was struck to address this problem. It was the first of the U.S. precious metal coins struck with less metal value than its face value. Standard silver content for U.S. coins was 90%, but this one was struck with only 75%. That meant it wasn't worth melting down. Indeed, the coin did stay in circulation, and this particular example is clear proof of that. It's been in so many hands and pockets that it's almost worn smooth. It was not an overly popular coin in its day, though, because it was so small that it was easily lost. In fact, it was known as a fish scale, due to its small, thin size and its silver color. Nevertheless, I think it's one of the most interesting U.S. coins. To me, its imagery conjures up fanciful ideas of the Old West. Though not intended to do so, the 6-pointed star reminds me of an old sheriff's badge, and the 1850s is the time typically associated with the beginning of the Wild West. Who knows? Maybe this coin was once in the pocket of somebody like Wild Bill Hickok. Flipping the coin over its horizontal axis, known as coin alignment, we see the reverse oriented correctly. We also see just how thin this coin really is. Like the obverse, the reverse carries a simple design. Space was at a premium on a coin that measured only 14 millimeters across. The normal focus of the reverse of a coin is the denomination, the stated value of the coin. And here, that's the case, only the value is shown in Roman numerals. Standing for 3 cents, there are 3 I's or ones inside a large letter C. Not only is the C the first letter of cents, but it's also the Roman numeral 100. The 3 inside the C would show 3 1/100ths of a dollar. With Latin still commonly a basis of higher education at the time, the use of Roman numerals on coins was not so unusual as it might be today. It also made for a more decorative depiction, making a motif like 3 columns encircled by a flowing semicircle, decorated with more circles and diamonds. It's almost a horseshoe in my Wild West analogy. Surrounding the letter C are 13 stars, representing the original 13 colonies. These are quite worn in this example, with several of the stars almost completely worn away. Well, now let's compare it with another 3-cent coin, issued only 13 years later. We'll start with the reverse this time. Again, we see the Roman numeral 3 looking even more column-like because of the thin lines inside each eye. This time, they aren't surrounded by a C, but by a laurel wreath. This is another classical element, as the laurel in Roman iconography represents victory or success. And perhaps in this case, it's a reference to the end of the American Civil War in 1865. The coin is larger and thicker than its silver counterpart, and this is partly because it's made of a base metal alloy, a combination of copper and nickel. Although the lowest denomination coins of 1/2 and 1 cent were struck mostly of copper, larger coins had always relied on their silver content, or in some cases gold content, for their value. Lower denomination coins were not legal for large debts such as taxes. Only silver or gold could be used for that purpose. With the problems of silver hoarding and the onset of the Civil War, precious metal currency became more and more scarce, and nickel was used in coins increasingly from the 1860s. Outside the laurel wreath, we find a decorative border of darts up to a raised rim. And flipping the coin over on its horizontal axis, we see that the edge itself is smooth. The coin was not likely to be cut down, since its metal was 75% copper and 25% nickel. The obverse of this 3-cent nickel could be termed heads, since it shows a woman's profile. However, this was not a woman who ever lived, but a personification of the concept of liberty. Once again, it's a kind of inheritance from classical Rome, where allegorical or mythological figures representing an idea were frequently used on coins and in state-sponsored art. In fact, the portrait here was based on a bust of Venus that the engraver J.B. Longacre had seen in a Philadelphia museum on loan from the Vatican. The figure of liberty, represented as a woman, was a very common image on coins of republics. It was in direct opposition to the depiction of a king or queen typically used on coins of monarchies. Lady Liberty here faces left and is struck in high detail, staring stoically out into the distance. Her hair is partially tied at the back, but with hanging strands at her neck, and she wears a tiara of sorts that tells us exactly who she is, Liberty. The date, 1866, appears below her. This was the second year of issuance, and more than 4 million were struck. United States of America is spelled out around Lady Liberty, and, like the reverse, there is a darted edge below the raised rim. At nearly 18 millimeters across, the nickel version of the coin was easier to handle than the smaller and lighter silver version. Nevertheless, the silver coin continued to be struck in very small numbers, up until 1873. This meant that both types of 3-cent coins circulated simultaneously, though the most used was the nickel version, despite some difficulty in striking the hard metal. Why 3 cents? It doesn't divide well in a decimal system and seems a very odd denomination indeed. There were two main reasons that the coin made sense in the American system. First of all, Spanish silver coins still circulated as legal tender in the U.S. until 1857. The 1 real coin, known as a levy, and the half real coin, known as a fip or a picayune, were relatively common, and they typically circulated at 12 and 6 cents respectively. Now this was all based on the 8 real coin, the Spanish milled dollar, being divided into 8 bits. If 2 bits was a quarter, 25 cents, then 1 bit was 12.5 cents, and a half bit was 6 1/4. Round these down, and we see the rationale of 12 and 6 cents. A half real could also be cut in half, and its nominal value would be 3 cents. Secondly, in 1851, standard letter postage was reduced from 5 to 3 cents. This made the denomination of 3 very useful indeed. The Civil War saw further decrease in precious metal coins in circulation. Paper money promises were issued to circulate as currency, but they were typically not well liked or trusted. Starting in 1862, the U.S. issued fractional currency notes, with the smallest being 3 cents. This denomination was most often used for postage. Then in 1865, the 3-cent nickel first appeared, and many were used to redeem the 3-cent paper notes. So much precious metal had left the country in the war that the U.S. increased base metal currencies in lower denominations. By making them eligible for paying debts at somewhat higher amounts, the trust in these coins increased a little. But nickel is a strong metal, and striking it to make coins, even in alloy, frequently caused coin dies to break. So why use it? The harder metal would survive in circulation longer, but the main answer is a lobbying campaign championed by Joseph Warton, who, it probably isn't surprising to hear, held majority financial interest in large-scale nickel mines. His campaign was so successful that copper-nickel became the alloy for the new 5-cent coin as well in 1866. The Coinage Act of 1873 ended bimetallism, placing the U.S. solely on the gold standard. Silver also came down in value compared to gold, and silver coins returned to circulation. Then, in 1883, letter postage rate dropped to 2 cents, heralding the end of a need for the 3-cent coin. The last 3-cent coin was struck in 1889. I hope you enjoyed looking at these coins with me. I'm Dr. Brad Hafford. Join me again next time on Coin Corner, part of my series, Money Talks.